They laughed at the man pushing a wheelbarrow, mocking his dirty clothes and tired face. To them he was nothing but a poor laborer. But what they didn't know was that behind the dust and sweat hid a secret so powerful, it would silence them all. He wasn't just anyone, he was a billionaire, and what happened next shocked everyone. The sun beat down mercilessly over the bustling streets of the small European town. Market day always brought noise, color, and laughter, but it also brought judgment. Vendors shouted prices, children chased each other, and women haggled over fresh fruit. In the middle of it all was a man bent over the handles of a rusty wheelbarrow. His clothes were worn, his hands calloused, and his face smeared with dust. He looked like any other laborer, just another nobody pushing loads for a few coins. People smirked as he passed. "Look at him," one man chuckled to his friend. "Probably hasn't had a proper shower in weeks." A group of young men lounging near a cafe burst out laughing when the wheelbarrow creaked loudly. "Careful, old man, your little cart might collapse before you reach the corner." But he wasn't old. Beneath the grime and the unkempt beard was a face so striking it could have belonged on the cover of a magazine. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, hid behind his lowered gaze, and the strength in his movements revealed more than most could see. His name was Daniel Moretti, a billionaire CEO known only in the circles of power and wealth. To the world here, though, he was nothing but a wheelbarrow pusher. Daniel had chosen this disguise deliberately. He had grown weary of the shallow praise and empty smiles he encountered in his world of wealth. Everyone wanted something from him: investors, acquaintances, even supposed friends. He longed to know how people treated him when they thought he was nothing, when he had no title, no money, no power. So he traded his designer suits for rags and chose the life of a market laborer for a time. As he moved through the square, a group of young women sitting on the steps of the bakery began to giggle. One of them, tall and dressed in fashionable clothes, cupped her hands around her mouth. "Hey, wheelbarrow boy. You missed a spot of dirt. Oh wait, that's your face." The group erupted in laughter, their voices sharp like knives. Daniel glanced at them briefly, his eyes unreadable. He didn't reply, just kept pushing forward, the wooden wheel squeaking under the weight of potatoes and cabbages. Inside, though, he felt the sting. Not because their words hurt him, but because it reminded him how quickly people judged by appearances. Nearby, an older woman with kind eyes noticed the scene. She shook her head at the girls. "You ought to be ashamed," she muttered under her breath. Then she turned to Daniel. "Don't mind them, son. Hard work is nothing to laugh at." Daniel offered her a small smile. "Thank you, ma'am." His voice was smooth, refined, and for a moment the woman tilted her head, sensing something unusual about him. But he bowed slightly and pushed on, disappearing into the crowd. Later that day, Daniel rested under the shade of a tree by the market's edge. He pulled out a small bottle of water, drinking slowly, observing the world around him. He saw arrogance, kindness, cruelty, and love all mixed in the chaos of human behavior. Every insult he received only confirmed why he had chosen this experiment. But the story was only beginning. For among those who mocked him was a man whose arrogance would soon cost him dearly, and among those who ignored him was someone whose compassion would change everything. Daniel's disguise would not last forever, and when the truth finally came out, the laughter would stop, and shock would take its place. The next morning, the market was alive again with its usual energy. Stalls brimmed with fruits, fabrics, and spices, their colors dazzling against the cobblestone streets. Daniel was already at work, his wheelbarrow filled with crates of oranges. The squeak of the wheel echoed as he pushed it through the crowd. The same mocking voices trailed behind him. "Look at him again," one of the young men jeered, pointing toward Daniel. "Maybe if he works hard enough, he'll afford a proper pair of shoes by next year." His friends roared with laughter. Daniel said nothing, his eyes focused on the path ahead. But every word was like another entry in a mental notebook. These were the people who revealed themselves when they thought no one important was watching. The group of fashionable girls from the bakery steps were there again too. The tall one, named Sophia, smirked as she caught sight of him. She walked deliberately into his path, forcing him to stop the wheelbarrow abruptly. "You almost ran me over," she said mockingly, dusting her expensive skirt though nothing touched it. "Watch where you're going, peasant." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "Apologies." Her friends snickered. "So polite," one of them teased. "Almost like he thinks he's better than us." Daniel locked eyes with Sophia just for a moment, and in that instant she saw something unusual, something powerful in the calmness of his stare. She frowned but quickly masked it with a laugh. "Move along, wheelbarrow boy. We don't have time for your sad little act." He moved past her without another word. By midday, Daniel was resting again under his usual tree when a small voice interrupted his thoughts. "Mister, do you need some water?" He looked up to see a little boy, no older than 10, holding out a tin cup. The boy's clothes were patched, his shoes worn, but his eyes were bright. Daniel smiled warmly, accepting the drink. "Thank you. What's your name?" "Marco," the boy said shyly. "My mama sells bread over there." He pointed to a small stall where a tired woman was arranging loaves. Daniel glanced at her, then back at the boy. "You're a good son, Marco. Never lose that kindness." The boy grinned and ran back to his mother, who gave Daniel a grateful nod. Unlike the others, she saw no shame in him. To her, he was simply a man working hard. That evening, as Daniel left the market, he passed by a luxury car parked outside a cafe. Inside, the same young men who had mocked him earlier were laughing loudly, sipping expensive drinks. One of them, a wealthy merchant's son named Victor, sneered through the open window. "Hey, wheelbarrow boy. Want to wash my car for a coin? Maybe you'll get to touch something expensive for once." Laughter erupted again. Daniel paused. He could have revealed himself right then. He could have crushed their arrogance with a single sentence, reminding them that the very banks their fathers depended on bent to his will. But he said nothing. He simply met Victor's gaze, calm and steady, and then walked away. That quiet restraint unsettled Victor more than any insult could have. What none of them knew was that in a week's time, the town's biggest charity gala was being held at the Grand Hotel, hosted by none other than Daniel Moretti himself. Invitations had been sent to the wealthiest families, including Victor's and Sophia's. They had no idea that the man they laughed at daily would soon walk into that ballroom dressed in a tailored suit, not as a laborer, but as the billionaire they all admired from afar. And when that moment came, the laughter would turn into silence. The evening settled in with a golden hue as the last traders closed their stalls and the quiet hum of the town center faded into silence. Adrian sat on the edge of his narrow bed in the tiny room above a carpenter's shop, staring at the cracked ceiling. All day, the sneers and laughter of the townspeople replayed in his mind. The weight of the disguise he had chosen pressed down heavily on him. He had wanted to blend in, to understand how people treated those who had nothing, but he hadn't expected the cruelty to cut this deep. Still, he told himself he had to endure it. He wasn't here for their approval. He was here to test the true nature of human character. The sound of hesitant footsteps broke his thoughts. A soft knock came at his door. He opened it to see Maria, holding a small basket covered with a cloth. Her eyes looked a little tired, but there was warmth in her smile. "I thought you might not have eaten," she said. "So I brought you something." Underneath the cloth were a few slices of bread, some stew in a small clay bowl, and a wedge of cheese. To Adrian it might as well have been a feast. He looked at her, trying to understand why she would care when everyone else dismissed him. "You didn't have to," he said quietly. "I know," she replied, shrugging. "But I wanted to. You've had a rough time and, well, kindness costs nothing." Her words struck him deeper than any insult could. He invited her inside, and they sat together on the small wooden stool and shared the meal. For the first time since arriving, he felt a flicker of peace. Maria asked him about his life, where he came from, what dreams he had. He told her a version of the truth, carefully stripped of wealth and status. He spoke of wanting to understand people, to see how the world looked from a different angle, and she listened intently, nodding. "What about you?" he asked. Maria sighed, her fingers tracing the rim of the bowl. "I take care of my younger siblings. My mother passed away and my father, well, he's too sick to work. So I clean houses, do laundry, anything I can to make ends meet. People look right through me most days as if I don't exist. But I keep going. I have to." Adrian felt something stir inside him. Respect. Admiration. Her resilience was raw, unpolished, but radiant. He realized that while he was pretending to be poor, she was living the struggle every single day. Yet she still found room to show kindness. That night, as she left with a small smile, Adrian made a silent promise to himself. When the time was right, he would change her life. The next morning, the town buzzed with excitement. News had spread that a delegation from a wealthy company was visiting to scout locations for a new headquarters. Everyone was eager to impress, from the mayor to the merchants. Men polished their shoes, women wore their finest dresses, and the air was thick with anticipation. Adrian, dressed in his same dusty clothes, pushed his wheelbarrow past the crowd gathering in the square. People sneered more than usual. "Look at him," someone whispered. "Dragging that cart like a stray dog, while real men make something of themselves." "Pathetic," another scoffed. Adrian ignored them. He spotted Maria among the onlookers. She didn't laugh. She gave him a small, reassuring nod as if to say, "Don't let them get to you." That simple gesture gave him strength. Soon, sleek black cars rolled into town, and men in tailored suits stepped out. The mayor rushed forward, his belly jiggling as he bowed deeply. Cameras flashed as reporters shouted questions. The crowd craned their necks to get a better view. Among the delegation was a tall, striking man in an impeccably cut navy suit. His presence commanded attention, his sharp features radiating confidence. The murmurs swelled as people realized he was the one in charge. Adrian felt a smile tug at his lips as he watched from a distance. The man in the suit was none other than his trusted associate, James, playing his role perfectly. Adrian had arranged everything, letting the world think James was the billionaire CEO. He wanted to see the townspeople's true faces when they believed wealth was present. The mayor groveled, offering the best of the town. Shopkeepers rushed to display their finest goods. Families brought forward daughters, smiling sweetly, hoping to catch the eye of someone rich. The same men and women who mocked Adrian hours ago now dripped with charm, bending over backward to please the visitors. Maria stood back, her expression unreadable. She didn't join the frenzy, nor did she change how she acted. Adrian noticed, and his respect for her deepened further. But the show wasn't over. Later that evening, at a grand dinner arranged in the town hall, James addressed the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we thank you for your hospitality. But there is something you must know. The true head of our company is not me." Confusion rippled through the hall. Adrian, still in his ragged clothes, pushed his wheelbarrow into the room. Gasps filled the air. Laughter burst out from a few corners. "That's a joke, right?" someone called. "That filthy man can't even afford shoes." But James raised his hand for silence. "You are mistaken. This man is the one you laughed at, insulted, and humiliated. He is Adrian, the real billionaire CEO." The room froze. Every eye turned to Adrian. The very people who mocked him now stared in disbelief. Some whispered apologies, others bowed their heads in shame. The mayor stammered, his face pale as milk. Adrian set the wheelbarrow aside and stood tall. His voice was calm but carried the weight of authority. "I came here not to flaunt wealth, but to see people for who they truly are. And now I know." He let the silence linger, his gaze sweeping the crowd. Then his eyes softened as they landed on Maria. "And while most of you chose cruelty, one person chose kindness." "Maria." Gasps echoed again as he stepped forward, taking her hand gently. She stood frozen, her eyes wide. "You showed me compassion when no one else would," Adrian said. "And for that, I will never forget you." Tears filled her eyes as the hall erupted with whispers. For the first time, Maria wasn't invisible. The night ended with a declaration that Adrian's company would indeed invest in the town, but under one condition: dignity and fairness for all workers. The people had no choice but to agree. But for Adrian, the true investment was in Maria, the one person who saw past his disguise and treated him like a human being when everyone else saw only a poor wheelbarrow pusher. The days that followed the revelation were a whirlwind in the town. People who once laughed at Adrian now greeted him with trembling voices and forced smiles. Shopkeepers who refused him water now offered baskets of fruit for free. The mayor, desperate to erase his own shame, announced plans to honor Adrian with a parade. But Adrian had no interest in their sudden change of heart. He had seen their true faces already, and their shallow attempts to please him meant nothing. Instead, his focus was on Maria. She tried to keep her life as it was, cleaning houses and working long hours, but things had changed. Neighbors who once ignored her now hovered, asking intrusive questions. Some were envious, whispering behind her back that she had trapped Adrian with pity. Others tried to befriend her overnight, hoping for favors. Maria remained calm through it all, but inside she was overwhelmed. One evening, Adrian visited her modest home. Her father lay asleep in the next room, and her siblings played quietly on the floor. Maria set down a cup of tea in front of him, her hands slightly trembling. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "People are talking." Adrian smiled faintly. "Let them talk. I don't care what they say. I care about the truth. And the truth is, you were the only one who treated me with kindness when I had nothing. That means more to me than any fortune." Maria shook her head, her eyes glistening. "But you're a billionaire. No one. I don't belong in your world." Adrian leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Maria, do you think wealth makes someone greater? I spent weeks pushing a wheelbarrow, covered in dust, laughed at, insulted. It was you who saw me as a man worth helping. That is what matters to me. Not money, not status, your heart." Her tears finally spilled over and she covered her face with her hands. For so long she had carried her family's burdens alone, unnoticed and unappreciated. To hear someone speak to her this way felt like a weight lifting. From that night, Adrian became a quiet presence in her family's life. Doctors were hired for her father's treatment. Her siblings received new clothes and proper schooling. Maria protested at first, but Adrian was firm. "This isn't charity," he told her. "It's what you and your family deserve." The transformation in their lives was steady but profound. The town watched in awe as Maria, once the overlooked cleaner, walked confidently through the market. Not because of expensive dresses or jewels, but because she carried herself with dignity. And at her side, Adrian often walked, no longer in rags, but in a simple suit that reflected both his power and his humility. Months later, the town square was filled again, this time for a celebration. Adrian stood before the crowd, his voice carrying across the stone walls. "When I came here, I wanted to learn how people treated those they believed had nothing. Many of you failed that test. But one person showed me what true humanity is. And today, I want to honor her." He turned to Maria, who stood frozen, her heart pounding. Adrian took her hand and knelt before her. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but this time there was no laughter, only silence heavy with awe. "Maria," he said, his voice steady, "you taught me the meaning of kindness. You reminded me that wealth without compassion is worthless. Will you allow me to spend my life proving that I will never forget what you gave me?" Tears streamed down Maria's face as the crowd erupted in applause. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible, she wasn't just a cleaner. She was the woman who had captured the heart of a billionaire, not because of beauty or power but because of kindness and strength. The townspeople watched, some ashamed, some inspired, as Maria whispered her answer, "Yes." Adrian rose, pulling her into his embrace. Cameras flashed, cheers filled the air, and the wheelbarrow that once carried the weight of his disguise now stood empty at the edge of the square, a silent reminder of how far they had both come. For the world, it was the story of a billionaire who revealed himself. For Adrian, it was the story of a woman who revealed the true wealth of the human heart. And together, they walked forward into a future built not on arrogance or cruelty, but on dignity, compassion, and love.